January is finally over. I swear it's been like 222 days since we last saw a new month, but I'm here to bring you my January wrap up, and my New Year's resolution is not going well. Hi, Katie here, better known as Reading with Katie Louise over on BookTok and Bookstagram, and I'm here to bring you my January reading wrap up, how many books I read and each rating I gave them. So I started January and 2025 with Good Bad Girl by Alice Feeney. So this is part of the backlist of me trying to get through Alice Feeney's books, which I am hoping to tackle in February. However, Beautiful Ugly is $7.99 on Kindle and only available in paperback. But this was a strong start to the month. I actually rated this 4.5 stars, so I have started rating a bit more specifically than just a rounded number. So this follows basically a load of women, which at the beginning doesn't make sense, but actually when you really read into it, it's quite interesting. So a woman literally has her baby taken out of her pram while she's in the shopping supermarket, and she's trying to figure out like what is going on and why this is happening. And it follows a series of women and it all does come together. I really enjoyed this. I've seen quite a few people sort of say it's not as good, but I did personally enjoy it, and it was a lovely way to start January and definitely a way to start the year. But yeah, definitely one of the top ones of my Alice Feeney collection. The next book I want to talk about is my first audio pick of January and 2025, and that was Love and Other Words by Christina Lauren. Now this isn't one that's been particularly on the forefront of my TBR, but it was available on BookBeats, and I wanted something romancy as I was reading a crime at the same time in physical, and this actually ended up being a 4.5 star rating. So this follows two characters who basically knew each other in childhood. They split up really randomly and they reconnect many years later. I thought this was such a beautiful story. There is so much going on throughout this story that I can't begin to explain. I do believe there'll probably some trigger warnings with this, but please do check them out if there are. But I found this emotional. I was committed. I actually ended up listening to half of this audiobook in one sitting. So obviously at the beginning of the year I wasn't working. It was the school holidays, and this was just so lovely, and I just literally got into my colouring book and got immersed in this book. I know there's controversy at the moment about audiobooks not being reading, but I was so committed to this book, and it's such a recommended read. I cannot begin to explain how much I recommend it. It's not my first Christina Lauren, but definitely my favourite one and an absolute must read. So the next book I had to pick up was an ARC that was due in the middle of January, and it did take me by surprise, and that is A 5-Letter Word for Love. I did actually rate this 4 stars. Now, if you saw me reading this at the time and you are part of the BookTok community that I'm part of, then you'll see that I actually struggled to get through this book at the beginning. It was a bit difficult to follow. So it follows two people who, they work at the same garage. The woman is a receptionist, the guy is a mechanic, and this guy is so antisocial. He doesn't really talk, he just gives one-word answers, and she's just a people pleaser who wants to try and be friends with him. They actually end up connecting over Wordle. Now, I've since started playing Wordle. I have dropped off doing that again, but it became something I wanted to do after reading this story. Now, as I said, it was a struggle to get through at the beginning. However, the end of this book actually made me cry. So it's not just about the romance in this book. So this actually follows so many beautiful relationships. The female main character finds herself. There are just so many beautiful things about this book, and I do really recommend it. It released in the middle of January. If you haven't and are a bit unsure, I would recommend. It is a bit of a slow burner. It is a slow start, but actually once you get immersed in the book and actually sat down and read it properly, I would absolutely recommend this book. It was absolutely gorgeous. The next one I obviously have to talk about is The Serial Killer's Wife by Alice Hunter. Now, I only picked this up purely because there is a series out on the TV. I've recorded it on the planner. My OCD does not allow for me to watch it basically until I've read the book, and I just don't like that it's sat there. So I had to pick this up. I opted for audio because it became available in BookBeats. You'll hear me mention BookBeats a lot. It's not ad or PR. I pay for the service. I get nothing from promoting it to you guys apart from just happy that you can experience it as much as I can. So this follows the point of view of a woman, and it also follows the point of view of the husband, and there are a few point of views going on in this book, but basically a woman goes missing and the police show up on the wife's doorstep saying that her husband is to blame. This was twisty. I think I rated it 4.25 stars. It was twisty. It was, yeah, I really enjoyed it. It's my first book by Alice Hunter personally, and I have since picked up more books you'll see later in this video, but this was such an enjoyable read. It was short chapters, quick paced. because they're changing the point of view, it didn't, like, it kept it going, it kept it fast paced, and the ending had my jaw on the floor. Like, I was gobsmacked. So yeah, if you haven't heard of this, guys, or you're just unsure, definitely pick it up, and obviously I'll get back to you when I've watched the TV adaptation. So a bit of a daunting read for me in January was my start of the Robert Hunter series and the Chris Carter series. So obviously I had to start with book number 1, and that was The Crucifix Killer. This was a 4.5 star rating. Now this is something else. I've not read anything this gruesome, and I love a good serial unaliver, but this was something else. So this follows I think he's a detective. Yeah, Detective Robert Hunter. And it follows him and his new colleague as basically they try to find where the Crucifix Killer is. Now, the first chapter in this book is definitely one that gets you hooked but gets you frustrated. So the first chapter actually tells you what's going to happen at the end of the book to an extent. You don't find out the ending, so it doesn't spoil anything, but it gets you hooked enough that you are committed to this book. Now, I said I was going to read one of these a month, and I realised I have not put the second book in my February TBR, but yeah, this is gruesome. They're on crucifixes, they're getting skinned alive. It is brutal. Like, but surprisingly, I loved it. So I would recommend it. I'm definitely going to get invested in this series. But yeah, if you haven't picked up the series and you're a bit scared about how gruesome it is, it's so well written that obviously I was going, ew, but not to the extent that I was having nightmares, that it was grim, that it was creeping me out. Like, I was invested in finding out who had done this, and yeah, absolute recommend. Next up was the book club pick for January for my bad book club that I'm part of, and that is Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. Now, unfortunately, this fell a little short for me, so I actually ended up rating this 3 stars. I think 3.5 actually. I just don't think I was in that era. So it is a fantasy book, but it's very lighthearted, it's very easy to read. That's why it is a 3.5 star rating. But it just wasn't quite for me. It was very cosy, it was lovely, but I didn't really get fully invested until the end of the book. I think it was a bit too slow for me. But bearing in mind, when you look at the previous 4 books I read, you'll actually see that I'm quite, like, in my crime and thriller era, which are quick-paced books. They've all been very high ratings. So I think that's why. I just think it was the wrong time for me to pick up that book. That being said, it was enjoyed by a lot of people. So I don't think it's a terrible book. Maybe if I read it when I was in my fantasy era, I might enjoy it, but it wasn't unenjoyable. I would still recommend it. I think a lot of people will like that kind of book. But yeah, unfortunately wasn't for me. Speaking of books that weren't for me, I read The Husband by Daniel Hurst. This was an art copy sent to me by Bookouture. Unfortunately, it was a 2.5 star rating, and I think even thinking about that was a little generous. I really did not enjoy this book. I was determined to finish it because I do like to give a full and honest opinion on art. Very rare I DNF an arc. In fact, I don't think I have yet. However, this basically, it follows a woman who, she knows that her husband's up to something, but she doesn't know what. Now, you know it is outlined from the start what is going to happen, which I don't like in a thriller. I think Daniel Hurst is described as a popcorn thriller. However, I thought, no, give it a chance. It's a thriller. It'll pick up towards the end. There'll be a twist. There was a bit of a twist, which might be why it got a 2.5. But for me, the ending was so far-fetched and so unbelievable that I just couldn't get with it. Like, I appreciate these books are fiction, and I am aware of that. But for me, this book, the ending was so far-fetched and so unbelievable that I can't explain it without spoiling it. So if you don't ever intend to read the book and want to talk to me about it, I will quite happily explain that ending and explain why it is so far-fetched. But yeah, it definitely just was not for me, and unfortunately I didn't enjoy it. That is the second book I've actually read of Daniel Hurst, and both are in the 2-star rating, unfortunately. So it's not an author for me, but that doesn't mean that you guys won't enjoy it. If you want something slow and popcorn thrillery and don't mind that things are a bit far-fetched, I'd probably recommend it for you, but personally it just wasn't my cup of tea. Now, continuing on with my Alice Feeney backlist, I picked up I Know Who You Are by Alice Feeney. This was a 4-star rating. I actually really enjoyed this book. Now, the ending, the reason it dropped a size is because the ending cringed me out a little bit. So I'm not going to spoil it because it is a massive part and a massive drop, like plot twist in the book. But this basically follows a woman who has quite a traumatic childhood, if I'm being quite, like, completely honest. And it follows the current timeline of her trying to live her life in a different identity, but it also follows her childhood as to why she came to that identity. This girl has been through some stuff. And then obviously her husband goes missing, and it is believed that he's been found unalived, and she's getting the blame because someone is trying to set her up. Honestly, I cannot begin to explain how much I did enjoy this book. I listened to this on audio if I haven't mentioned that already. And yeah, I would recommend this. I actually haven't rated an Alice Feeney book less than 4 stars. All I have left to read is Daisy Darker and Beautiful Ugly. I'm struggling to get hold of Beautiful Ugly because I don't want the paperback, unfortunately. So I might just have to wait a little longer for that. But I have still got Daisy Darker, and that is on my February TBR. But yeah, if you haven't picked up Alice Feeney yet, this is your sign to pick up an Alice Feeney book. The next book I want to talk about, and was part of my January TBR, is The Measure by Nikki Erlick. I was so kindly gifted this. So this was in the poll for the book club originally for New Beginnings, and I was really intrigued by it. I had voted for it, and Nick, my absolutely lovely friend, decided that he would gift it me. But yeah, so The Measure follows, I think, 8 different characters as the whole world, if they're over the age of 22, receive a box with a string in that dictates how long they're going to live. As the story develops, basically they find out exactly to the day how long they're going to live. So you have your short straws, your long straws. Now, this was enjoyable, but it was only 3 stars, I think I rated it. Yeah, 3.5, sorry, just checking on my phone. And again, it was enjoyable, but I don't know, I can't quite put my finger on it. It was a bit slow. There were a lot of characters to try and keep up with, and towards the end they did actually become like connected. So like it made sense, but I think it took me so long to get into it. It was a struggle, and I started to slump with being back at work. So I think that was a factor, but it's an interesting concept, and I didn't not enjoy it, especially towards the end. But I did end up switching to audio towards the end of this just to help me finish it because I was struggling. But yeah, I think I'd still recommend it. It's an interesting concept, but I just don't think it's my kind of genre, and maybe a little too slow for me. So the next book I want to talk about, on my last audio book of no, that's a lie, it was not the last audiobook, is Cross the Line. I did end up finishing this at the end of January. I actually put it down to pick up an ARC, so I was actually reading this in physical to start with, ended up finishing it in audio. Apologies for the confusion. So this is an F1 romance. Now, I ended up rating this 3.75 stars. It wasn't the best thing, and I think the narration has something to do with that. So the female main character, fine. Put the female main character's voice in the male main character, and for some reason she sounds absolutely horrendous, and I think that's because the male's trying to do a woman's voice. So yeah, unfortunately that kind of did not make my experience enjoyable, but yeah, I don't really know how to explain it at the moment. So another audiobook I decided to pick up was The Serial Killer's Daughter by Alice Hunter. So as I've previously said, I really enjoyed The Serial Killer's Wife. The Serial Killer's Daughter was no different. This was a 4-star rating, however, it wasn't quite as quick paced. But it follows a similar kind of setting. So this is where the woman's dad was a serial unaliver, and then things start happening. She actually has blackouts, and then a woman goes missing, and she actually can't tell you where she was because she had a blackout. But obviously people don't know that she is the daughter of a serial unaliver. Nonetheless, this was still enjoyable, and I would absolutely recommend it. It was a quick and easy read. Like I said, I definitely am invested in this series, so if you haven't picked it up, I would absolutely recommend it. The final book that I want to talk about is The Woman in Room 13 by Leah Conan. Now, this was an ARC that released on January 30th, and this was a 4.25 star rating for me. Now, the only issue is I think I would have enjoyed it more had NetGalley sent me a copy that was not, like, corrupted. That is a whole new rant, however. But yeah, the formatting just was not right on that book. So this follows a woman who is going to be a standing caretaker at a house. She gets there being told that the room she's staying in, room 13, will be clean, tidy. She gets there, it's a mess, and there is an unalive body on the floor. She goes to report it. This is during a snowstorm, may I add. She goes to report it. The body then disappears. It is very spooky. It is very enjoyable. The chapters are reasonably length. It follows 2 points of view. So it follows the main character who is trying to solve what's going on, why she thinks she's going mad. She is a recovering alcoholic as well. And yeah, it was twisted. The ending had my jaw on the floor, and the epilogue, wow. So it just left you with so many questions, but in a good way. Like, I don't know how to explain it, but I did really, really enjoy it. And Like I said, this has now released and I do recommend that you pick it up. So that is a wrap for January. Let me know in the comments how many books you read, your favourite book from January. Have you read any of mine? Do you relate? But yeah, thank you for joining me, guys. I hope you've enjoyed yet another video by me, and as always, please like and subscribe, and I'll catch you all on the next video.